Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of Dax of Adiron. My name is Corey, and I recently set myself a goal of hiking the 46 high peaks and the mountains I grew up in, which is, of course, the Adirondack Mountains in northern New York. A high peak is any mountain which is at least 4,000 feet in altitude, and while technically there are only 42 of them in the Adirondacks, originally there were thought to be 46 before more accurate measurements were made in the early to mid-20th century. A hiking club was spawned from this that became known as the Adirondack 46ers. So I endeavored to join their ranks by hiking each one of them and sharing my experience with you. This morning, I'm hiking a well-known and relatively easy high peak, relatively being the key word, called Phelps Mountain. It's named after a well-known and well-liked Adirondack guide named Orson Schofield Phelps, or Old Mountain Phelps as he was known. He cut the first trail up the neighboring and largest of all the high peaks, Mount Marcy, which I won't personally be climbing for a while. You can get access to Phelps Mountain from the Adirondack Lodge, located roughly 6 miles south of Lake Placid. As the 32nd highest peak, its elevation is 4,161 feet, with an elevation gain of 2,260 feet. The trail I'm hiking starts out as the Van Hovenberg Trail. It takes you on a lovely walk through the woods down to Marcy Dam, then east for about a mile until you make a left onto the Phelps Mountain Trail, which comes to a total of roughly 4.6 miles one way. For equipment, I brought along my day pack with 100 milliliters of water, a windbreaker, a PB&J and a protein bar, and my camera equipment. Now, as I make my way south to Marcy Dam, I'd like to explain something that could be important if you plan on hiking here. The Adirondack Lodge is owned and operated by the Adirondack Mountain Club. As they need money to operate, you'll currently need to pay $15 to park here. Now, you are allowed to park along one side of the road without having to pay before you reach the lodge, but you'll be adding a good distance to your overall hike, so keep that in mind. Starting out from the lodge, the temperature was roughly 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and it would top out in the afternoon at a comfortable and pleasant 72 degrees. I slept terribly the night before, as I always do before one of these hikes. But despite that, I was feeling fresh and energized by the sun's morning rays coming through the trees. Now, if you take this path, you'll need to pay attention to the signs all along the trail until you reach the Phelps Trail, as it is not a straight line to your destination. And if you take the wrong trail, you could end up hiking Marcy or Algonquin, peaks 1 and 2 in terms of altitude. My cousin actually lost a toenail to Marcy when she and my aunt meant to hike Phelps, but missed the turnoff. About 40 minutes after setting out, I came out of the trees to what's known as Marcy Dam. Originally built in the 1930s, the spot was known as a sort of resting area for hikers. People could meet up here, eat lunch, or go for a swim. but Hurricane Irene washed away the bridge going over the dam back in 2011. So instead of rebuilding, the dam itself was slowly dismantled, and this is what remains. A wooden bridge was constructed just north of the dam site, and so this is the route I took across the water. Once over the bridge, you'll turn back south very briefly until you come across another sign-in box. From here, you turn east, and after just a couple of minutes, you'll link up with another stream that runs between Phelps and another mountain that is not a high peak called TR Mountain, or Teddy Roosevelt Mountain. Teddy Roosevelt was, of course, our 26th president, and by all accounts, absolutely loved being in the Adirondacks. Despite my studying the trail before I went on the actual hike, I missed the river crossing here. Now, I knew I needed to cross the river, but I had naively thought that there would be a sign that would let me know when to cross. I mean, actually, there may have been, I just didn't see one. This goes back to what I was saying earlier with the whole you need to pay attention thing. Should probably take my own advice. So, as you can see, I kept going along the south side of the river until I finally realized that the trail was getting less and less definitive. After about a quarter mile, I turned around and walked back to the last place the river touched the trail. And there's the trail marker. Today being the first day of fall, the leaves were just beginning to fade to red and orange. Over the next week or so, they'll all turn, and the deciduous trees of the Adirondacks will be totally bare before we know it. But winter is still several months away, and for now we can enjoy the colors of the fall, the mild temperature, and the complete lack of any of the more annoying bugs. It really is my favorite time of year. By the time you reach the trailhead, you've already completed 3/4 of the hike in terms of distance. But the Phelps Mountain Trail has an immediate and nearly continuous elevation gain, so about 75% of your effort will start now. Cluttered with large mossy rocks, the first section has a gentle, almost loving incline. But walking uphill is still walking uphill, and I hadn't had anything to drink since I set off from the lodge, so early on I stopped to take a water and stretch break. Now the trail may start easy, but it isn't very long before it starts to get steeper, and more often than not, you'll be scrambling your way up large boulders or avoiding getting tripped up by old tree roots. If you saw episode number 4, you'll know we had an extremely wet summer, but the rain finally seemed to be tapering off at this point, and the last several days had been dry, which meant that the trails weren't completely caked in mud. Don't get me wrong, certain sections were definitely wet, but nothing like we had been seeing all summer. After about a half mile, the trail turns back towards the northwest as you make your way to the mountain ridge. It does level off briefly here and there, but for the most part, it's a steady elevation gain. The ridge portion changes slightly from lots of smaller rocks to lots of open-faced rock. I'm not a big fan of the open-faced rock scrambling. It works out your calves pretty hard, and it's murder on my knees on the way back down. But luckily for me, unlike Giant Mountain, the open rock on this hike is few and far between. The entire Phelps Mountain Trail being only 1 mile to the summit, it wasn't long before I began to be able to turn around to see some spectacular views. Looking to the south and west, Marcy and Algonquin can be seen towering over their fellows. I don't think I'm quite ready for them yet, but my confidence grows with each one of these hikes. I crested the peak to find that there was no marker anywhere in sight, so I explored a bit until the trail took me to the southern edge of the mountain. After 3.5 hours, I had reached the summit. The temperature had gone up enough that I didn't need a jacket, and the wind was nearly non-existent. During my hour-long rest at the summit, I ate lunch and then laid out on the open rock until I was visited by a small bird. Now, I'm not overly knowledgeable when it comes to birds, but my research tells me that this is a slate-colored adult male dark-eyed junco. They're a common type of sparrow found all across North America, and they tend to be at higher altitudes during the summer months. They also have their nests on sloping ground or depressions in the forest, and not in the trees themselves. I named him Jack. Once he disappeared over the edge of the cliff, I packed up my bag and began making my way back to the lodge. Thanks for checking out my video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and tap the bell so you'll know when a new adventure is posted. Join me next time in the Daks of Adiron.